All right. So, been teaching some classes on the lines of the hand, and it's got some questions that came out about that, and just want to make a couple of short little videos about that now because there's some interesting questions that came up that I haven't thought about for a long time because I kind of forgot about this particular issue, and that is to do with the major waterline or the heart line and how the heart line goes across the hand. And it's a widely held view that the straight major waterline or straight heart line is to show a more mental or cerebral attitude towards sex and sexuality, whereas the curved one is much more physical and much more amorous and wanting to get involved with that. And I've just got a couple of books here to kind of illustrate that. First one is Nathaniel Alban's Sexual Palmistry, page 56. A straight heart line reveals a more mental type of lover. Fantasies in romance are important to them. An intimate dinner with champagne candles is an ideal prelude to sex. And whereas the heart line that's curved up towards the fingers is a more physical or instinctual sexuality. These people prefer more rough and tumble sex, right? Having sex on a kitchen table on the back seat of a car with their clothes on. So that's a really common view. Andrew Fitzherbert does the same thing with hand psychology. He talks about it, the heart line, in exactly the same way. So the straight heart line is cerebral and mental, and the curved heart line is the one that's actually sexual. Equally, in Fred Getting's book, the Book of the Hand, it's exactly the same kind of idea as well. So it's a heart line. The heart line ends below Jupiter and is low down. It's described as someone who's idealistic. This idealism requires a deeper relationship with the partner than mere physical contact affords. So, this is quite a commonly held view amongst different writers, and some of whom I actually would respect. But actually, this understanding of the heart line or the waterline in this way is completely wrong. And it's obvious when it's completely wrong. And I'll talk about that now to kind of show you what I mean by that. So I'm just going to share something on the screen here. And the reason why I say it's wrong is because there's two things that really show that, and that is to do with the way that the line forms and the kinds of people that have that. So the most common form of the line, and it really is the most common form of the major waterline, is for the major waterline to be curved. And when I say curved, you can see, as you can see in this example here, it goes from the base of the little finger up towards between the fingers. It doesn't quite matter where it goes to, but you can see it's a natural curve. And when I actually look at a study of hands of lined like that on the hands, just even a rough sample of them, you find that the majority of the water lines are in fact curved. So here's another one, just to give you an example right there. You can see that the line is really curving up towards the fingers. Not can be concerned about the endings right now. Here's another one curving up towards the finger. And in this example, there's a few broken examples, but the point is even in that one, which is quite short, you can see there's a natural curve up towards the waterline, towards the water finger. So the curvature of the waterline is the most common and most commonly found form of the major waterline. It's much more common than the straight major waterline, and it's completely wrong to think of the straight major waterline as showing somebody who is more mental in orientation. And I think the easiest way to show that is to give you an example of somebody who clearly isn't, and somebody who completely orientated towards physical sex and sexual expression. And that is this guy, who you probably recognize and you probably know who he is. And as you are very well aware, if you know anything about the history of Russell Brand, he's a bona fide sex addict. He talks about his sexual experiences and his proclivity towards having far too much sex with far too many people. He was taken on holiday when he was 17 to Hong Kong and the Far East by his father. And that's where he got his introduction to prostitutes and sex workers. And you can see, and there's lots of handprints I can show you right now, but look at this. You see, look at the line there. It is almost drawn on with a ruler. It's really straight. And so this is clearly someone who's very physical in his approach to sex and very orientated towards sexual and physical encounters without any emotional content. And he talks about that quite freely in his autobiography. He is widely known as being a sex addict, and the sex addict clearly isn't involved in the mental component of a relationship with another person. They are doing the sexual act very, very physically. And look, if you think about it, this actually makes complete sense, because one of the things that we do in chirology, of course, is we use the elements. And the easiest thing to work, the way to work with the elements is always to divide things according to elemental principles. So we can see that the water line starts at this level, and we can see that the highest level of it is up at this level here. So we've got this kind of band where the water line can actually go in. And if we divide this in terms of the elements, it becomes really clear what's actually going on with this water line. So the element's going to get graduated like that, in that kind of way. You have earth at the bottom, you have water as the next one up, then fire, and then air. So what should be obvious about that is, if a water line stays low in the hand, it is staying much more at this earth level. And if a line is fire, in its straightness, you can see it's more likely going to end in the fire area, like the fire level there. That's kind of where these lines finish. So the lower down the line stays on the palm, the more the expression of that water element is going to be physical or tangibly or sensorially based. That's why, because it's not even getting up into the air elements at all. And of course, the air element is to do with communication and mentality and thinking and communicating. So it's actually going to only be in the curved water lines where you get the airline actually going up to that level. So let's clear that up, and you can see what I mean. So let's go back to that. See again, you can see there's a straight water line. It doesn't go up between the fingers. It just does not get into sort of what you might call the air element, the air section of the hand at all. And clearly, it's only with you doing that you're going to have a sort of more communicative and mentally involved relationship with another person. If it's staying down low, it's going to stay in this very physical zone. Let's go back to looking at the other handprints that we were looking at a second ago, the curved airlines, curved water lines. Here we go. So with the curved water line, you can see that the curve itself takes the water line right into this upper zone as well. It's not falling short. And we consider the line to be complete when this line actually reaches all the way to the space between the fingers, because that's like the energy of that line is actually getting out of the hand. It's actually getting to the edge of the hand and is coming forth. And the more the line reaches towards that, the more open that person is and the more able they are to connect with other people. And I think it's quite valuable to think about the form of the line in this way as well, because a curved line is ruled by the element air, whereas a straight line is ruled by the element fire. And a curved line basically shows there's a gradual arc in the way that the person's emotions are expressed from their origin through to the connectivity to the other person. And that arc basically shows the process of getting to know somebody quite gradually. And of course, the majority of people, what they do when they get to know people is they first meet them, they have a conversation with them, they maybe get their phone number, they follow up with a communication on a phone or a message, and they meet again for maybe a dinner, and then a third time. And there's a gradual process of getting to know each other, and the curved water line shows this gradual sort of coming together. And through that process of negotiation and communication, there's an increase in the proximity of the people in that relationship dynamic. Whereas what happens when you have a straight water line, basically what happens when you have a straight water line is you have somebody who basically is going to be very direct in the way that they create connections with other people. There's a sort of straight water line has this kind of intensity and directness to it. There's no subtlety about it. There's kind of like, hello, how are you? Okay, let's go and have sex. It's a really straightforward and direct approach. And actually, again, Russell Brand even talks about that's how he was dealing with these women when he had 10 mistresses and other girlfriends and one night stands on the side. His sex addiction was basically he was always trying to get himself sexually satiated and ejaculated. And that's what you have when you have this fire quality line. It's very direct. There's no beating about the bush. There's no gradually getting to know. But in fact, there's no mental involvement or engagement with that person on a psychological level whatsoever. It's purely seeing there's the emotional interaction with that person as a sexual transaction, which is what you get when you get this line staying so low in the hand. They're very direct. They're quite crude. You know, there's a kind of grabby quality to people with this fire quality waterline. They're touchy, feely, gropey. You know, they're always trying to. There's no subtlety about it. This kind of going directly for the contact with that person, without any of the sort of sophistication of the communication that's going on up here. And so, you know, it's completely the opposite from the way these things are talked about in most of these priority books. It actually is completely the opposite. So the straight waterline is not the cerebral and mental one. The straight waterline is the physical and grabby one, and the sexual one. And the curved waterline is the one is the line that's basically shows somebody who's more cerebral in their approach and desires that kind of communication. Again, here's a really good example. You can see in Russell Brand's hand how his waterline ends underneath the water finger. It doesn't come anywhere near the end of the water finger. It's really, really low. And the lower the line in the hand, the more subterranean the emotional expression is. The less it's come to the surface, the less it's communicated and articulated, and the more physically based it actually is. And this is, and when we actually take that further, take that to the extreme, and then you'll see what I mean when we talk about people who've got, for example, let's get back to here. Okay, so share again, where people have actually got known problems with their sexual expression. And here is one of the world's famous examples, of course, Mr. Jimmy Savile. So Jimmy Savile was a sexual predator in Britain for about 40, 50 years, assaulted and committed crimes against at least 400, maybe 450 people. And again, you've got the same thing. You've got this waterline that doesn't come up between the fingers. It stays down really low. So it's staying down in that part of the hand there. And that gap is an indication of the lack of the mental process, the lack of the communicative process. And the low lying of the waterline, this one isn't quite as straight as Russell Brand's, but it's still very low lying. It's not coming up because it's not coming up between the fingers. And that low lying is what, again, gives this quality of a more sexual orientation, more physical, grabby sexual orientation, which is shown by a straight major waterline. So again, look at that. We do the levels again, and you can see that just the levels in that, it's not even getting to the fire level, this one, it's just staying at that water level. So, you know, and in this particular case, there's a kind of possessiveness and sort of, you know, a desire to, if there's a possessive quality about people like this when the waterline's sort of staying so low like that in that kind of way. But it's not a mental orientation to relationships whatsoever. It's a physical orientation towards relationships, physical and sexual. And you know, if you've got somebody who's actually being a sexual pest like he was, grabbing women's butts on British television, then you've actually got somebody who's got this very direct, tangible approach. And the problem for this, for other people who have a curved waterline, is they can't actually believe what's just happened, because the person is so direct with the way that they make a pass at somebody else. There's no foreplay, there's no prelude, there's no conversation, there's no introduction. It's just, let me just grab you. And that's the intense sexualization of the major waterline when it's low lying and it's straight. And I'll give you another example. If we can just get out of this one. So we've got another example I can show you of, again, somebody who does exactly the same thing. And so you've got this this is probably one of the straightest waterlines I've ever seen at all. And you can see quite clearly that the waterline is almost being drawn on with a ruler. It's so straight. And this man was renowned for his boundary breaches in his sexual assaults and his sexual indiscretions with women. And you've got exactly the same kind of thing going on. You know, there's no communication about what's happening. There's no ability to kind of connect with those two things. The energy is kept really low, and it's very, very straight. It's very direct. And now, I'm not saying anything about their sexual prowess. I'm not, just because Russell Brand was a sex addict and he's got a straight waterline, it doesn't mean he's any good at sex at all. I'm not making any suggestion about any ability of that. And in terms of, if there's anything good about it, it's simply a performative thing. And it's nothing to do with actually connecting or relating, because what we do know about people who've got these low-lying waterlines, the ones that don't go up between the fingers, is they're not very good at emotionally connecting. They're not very good at presence, and they're not very good at listening. It's all about them and their desire, and the pushing forward of their desire in this kind of intense and focused way. It's almost obsessive way. And I think that's something that's really important to reflect upon when you come to put these low-lying waterlines, because the lower lying the waterline, the more like a simian line it is. So let's have a look at a simian line. So if I just get up an example of a simian line, and you'll kind of see what I'm talking about with this, because the simian line basically is a very low-lying waterline. The waterline isn't coming up at all between the fingers. It's staying really low down in the hand. In fact, it's staying completely at the earth level. And what we can understand from that is you've got someone who's basically, their emotions are buried. They are subterranean. They are held down. They're held within. They're not articulated. These people have enormous difficulty articulating their emotions, or what we call expressing their emotions or talking about their feelings, because the line doesn't come up at all. It stays completely low down in the palm, and there is no ability for the energies of this line to be stretched up into the air section whatsoever. It's completely straight. So I think it's, when we see straight water lines, it's good to remember what a straight water line is. A straight water line, the extreme straight water line is the simian line, because it stays at the same height. It starts at this level and it stays at this level. It's about straight as you can possibly get. And the ones we've just seen with people like Jimmy Savile and the sexually abusive Buddhist priest, they are straight water lines which are coming up a little bit higher, but they're nonetheless straight. And so it's only a bit of difference between these two. A straight water line is basically a variation of a simian line. And when you think about a simian line, if you think about the water line, a straight water line as a simian line, you get much closer to what it's actually all about. Let me see if I can find an actual handprint. And everybody who's studied handreading knows that anyone with a simian line has a very impaired relationship with their emotional experience, and relationships are really difficult for those people, and they're not articulating their emotions, and they can't feel their emotions, because all those emotions are really buried. And it's the lack of subtlety within the simian line or within the straight water line that most people have a problem with in terms of relationships, and why those are seen to be much more kind of predatory in terms of their orientation. So the straight water line is not a mental water line. It's a physical water line. It shows that the energy of the emotions within the waterline are kept to the physical level, and if they're articulated at all, they're going to be articulated in rather a crude, physical, sexualized way, not in a refined, communicative, discursive, gradually getting to know you kind of way. So I really wanted to clear that up, because it's a really very, very basic point, and it's quite clear that most books on palmistry have got this idea completely wrong. And I think it's because in a majority of cases when you get a straight major waterline, you also get lots of upper minor waterlines. So basically, they haven't differentiated the significance of the upper minor waterline vis-a-vis the major waterline. But that's the principle you need to look at. If it's a curved waterline, it's ruled by air, and the person gets to know other people gradually. If it's a straight waterline, they're very direct and very demonstrative and very demanding in their emotional expression, and they don't usually respect other people's boundaries. Fortunately, the straight major waterline is extremely rare. I would have to give you a study to get the percentage figures of that, but it's probably something like 80% curved and 20% straight. I don't know, that's just a guess, but it's of that kind of order. Or maybe it's even more, maybe it's like 95% curved and 5% straight. It's really quite rare to see a straight major waterline. And when you do, it's quite clearly characteristic, as we've seen with Russell Brand. So if you don't know much about straight major waterlines, go and read Russell Brand's biography or just something about his sex and his sex life, and you'll find everything you need to know about a straight major waterline. It's not a mental, communicative, and relationship orientated waterline at all. It's a sexualized, desire driven, physical kind of waterline with a lack of sophistication. All right, so I hope that clears up that little palmistry dilemma for you. I'm going to be posting a lot more videos over the next few weeks, so don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to seriously learn about some hand reading, come and join me at patreon.com/handreading, and I'll see you soon.